Welcome everyone, where we're going to be talking about your project manager this morning, which is your liver. You've just gone into your second day of detox and your liver is very busy today. It's gone into a different stage of detox. And as it goes through this stage, I'm going to be explaining to you what's happening in your liver. Your liver I call the project manager, because on a job site, all the plumbers come to the project manager, the painters come to the project manager. The project manager is orchestrating the job site. So that's what your liver's doing. It's orchestrating the job site, of course, which is the human body. So a few facts on the liver. The liver is the largest internal organ in the body, and the liver is the only organ in the body that has the ability to regrow. And when you understand the liver, when you understand what it does, and it's the role that it plays, you'll understand why God made it so. You see, cancer cannot get a hold on the body if the liver's working in optimum performance. So those pieces of information alone make it a very important that we human beings know something about the house we live in, especially your liver. Your liver is under your right rib, and if it's not happy when you push it, it'll go, don't. Is that right? Very simple test. And you can see that I'm pushing my fingers way up under my ribs there. But I don't have any discomfort at all. If you have any discomfort, no need to fear. You're in a detox and your liver's very happy. Sorry, not very happy, because it's very busy. It's very busy helping you to detox. But it'll certainly recover. So what I want to do before I show you what the liver's doing today, I want to show you what it does with everything that comes into the body. So environmental poisons coming into the body, everything goes straight to the liver. And if it's toxic, the liver says, whoa, nasty guy, wrap him up in fat and store him. And if the liver looks at it and says, no, we can break that down to a state that can be easily released, that is what it will do. What about food? Let me show you what it does with the food that comes in. And never in the history of mankind have human beings eaten so many carbohydrates. So we're going to do a carbohydrate assessment. And I want you to tell me what most Americans had for breakfast this morning.
Toast, eggs.
Yeah, toast. So here we've got bread. Cereal's a very popular one. One lady said egg. Sorry, no one cooks anymore. Is that right?
Donuts.
Donuts. Surely not. And we talked about the healthiest part of the donut, didn't we? Which is the hole in the middle. So we'll say for the donuts, the cakes, you call them biscuits. Do you know what we call biscuits? Cookies. So when we see a sign that says biscuits and gravy, we're thinking, oh, these Americans are strange people. They put gravy on their cookies. But I realise that I think your biscuit is like a scone, like a roll or something like that. So I'm just going to say cakes, etc. So this takes into consideration the donuts, the biscuits, the cakes, the pastries, the pies, all of that. And pizza. When I was a little girl, I didn't know what a pizza was. I don't think I knew what a pizza was till I was about 20. So I'm a baby of the 50s, 60s, so they weren't really around then. Same with pasta. I don't think there's a home today that doesn't have pasta. Would that be right? And rice is another carbohydrate. Potatoes. That's a high carbohydrate food. And last and certainly least in nutritive value is the pure crystallized acid that's extracted from the sugarcane plant. Now, would you agree with me, students, that Americans have become high carbohydrate consumers? Yes. Now, I say become because I don't think anyone chose to eat this way. It was just there, it's just easy. We're such a fast society today, and many people don't think about their lunchtime till they're hungry, or their evening meal till they're hungry. And there's no time to soak the legumes and cook the legumes. There's no time to steam the vegetables. They just want food now. So I think it's something that is just, you could say, evolved. And it's got to the point where these are very popular foods, and we are getting the ramifications of that. And people are starting to think, now what's happening here? What's happening here? The first person that blew the whistle on it really was probably in the 80s, Dr. Robert Atkins. You've heard of Dr. Robert Atkins?
Yeah.
Now his book, it hit the press, and it became New York Times best-selling cookbook 4 years running. Wow. The nutritionists and the doctors hated him. Someone loved him. Who loved him? The people. You know why they loved him? It worked. His story is fascinating. He's a GP in his 40s, putting on a bit of weight, and of course that's what this will do. Let me show you why it does it. We'll just take a little, we're going to finish Atkins in a minute, but let me show you. You see, he knew his science. That's why, and the science I'm about to show you. All of these foods break down in the gastrointestinal tract to a singular structure called glucose. Now the glucose goes on the M1 main highway, portal vein, straight to the project manager. And then the project manager determines where this glucose goes. And it'll take it inside the cell. Remember I promised you we'll be going to the CBD every day? So the glucose goes inside the cell. It goes through a 20-step pathway. The 20-step pathway gives us 2 units of energy. Isn't that why we eat? Now the end result of that 20-step pathway is a chemical form of glucose called pyruvate. Pyruvate is the chemical form of glucose that gets fed into the next section of the cell, often called the powerhouse, because this little 8-step pathway delivers to us a whopping 36 units of energy. So the question now arises, why does a 20-step pathway only give us 2 units, and why does an 8-step pathway give us 36 units of energy? The difference is oxygen. This is called an anaerobic pathway. Anaerobic because it doesn't use oxygen. It produces energy by the process of fermentation. That's where a cancer cell lives. Remember what we looked at yesterday? Doesn't like oxygen, consumes 15 times the rate of glucose because it's running up there. Interesting. This pathway is called an aerobic pathway. It's called an aerobic pathway because it uses oxygen. Tomorrow we're going to pursue that. But today we've got to stay on track. We're looking at the journey of glucose. So the first place that the liver will send the glucose, number 1, is to the cell to be burnt as fuel. But on a high carbohydrate diet, you got a lot of glucose left over. And so now the body stores it in what I call the most amazing fuel, quick fuel supply in the body. It's called glycogen. They're little molecules of glucose just sitting in your muscle cell waiting to be used. Do you wonder how you had the energy to exercise this morning? We only gave you broth last night. You only had aloe lemon water this morning, and yet you did it. It's because of your glycogen stores. They're already sitting in your muscle cell, and as soon as you move the body requiring more, they just pluck it through the energy cycle. Pluck another one through the energy cycle. What an amazing process. It actually brings me to that verse in the Bible at Psalm 139 verse 14 where the Bible says, I will praise you, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works, and that my soul knows right well. So number 2, the glucose is stored as glycogen. I call glycogen the diabetic's best kept secret. Because if blood sugar goes low, what do? Get on the exercise bike. Release your glycogen stores. In fact, one young man, a diabetic, he said to me, why didn't anyone tell me about glycogen? Now I can understand his frustration because, wow. Let's go back to glucose. So on a high carbohydrate diet, we've still got glucose left over because the cell can only store so much. By the way, the liver stores a little bit, and this glycogen can be sent all over the body, whereas the glycogen that's in the muscle cell, it's like in a prison, it can only be used by the muscle cell. And when you think about it, that's the cell that has probably the most demand on it. So what's the body going to do with the rest? What's the liver going to do with the rest of the glucose? Well, we've got an amazing fuel depot, fuel supply. I call it the basement stores. You know what the basement stores are? They're the fat cells. And what's happening to Americans today? Whew. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But Australia's up equal with America here. 63% of Australians are obese or overweight. Whew. What's caused that? Here it is. It's the high carbohydrate diet. So the third place that the liver will send that excess glucose is as fat. Now what I've given you here is basic science. I might have mentioned earlier that I like to use the BHSC method: Bible, history, science and common sense. So with history, we've got the history of people who never used to eat a high carbohydrate diet because people used to make what they eat, and that all takes a long time. So what did people eat a lot of? Well, Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, in her book Gut and Psychology, she actually looks at the histories, and she said thick vegetable soups was probably one of the most common foods that people ate. You see, the mother would, on her fuel stove, would put it in the corner, and maybe she'd throw a bone or two in there as well, especially if they didn't have a lot of money, but the vegetables are cheap. So historically, people ate, on the whole, a lot of vegetables. And let's go back to even more primitive times when there wasn't refrigeration. If an animal was killed, they would dry a lot of it, they'd have a big feast for a couple of days, but they may not eat meat again for another month. What did they eat? A lot of vegetables, roots, things that they grew. So historically, you can see that. Now we're looking at scientifically. So when people are on this high carbohydrate diet, too much glucose is released. The body can only deal with so much, so it has to be stored in the fat cells. Now, Dr. Robert Atkins knew that science. So he looked at himself getting this, what we call spare tire. So he decided to do an experiment on himself. He decided to stop all carbohydrates. What did he eat? He ate a lot of vegetables, okay? And a lot of people don't realise that, with the exclusion of the potato. So he was eating a lot of fibre. And he knew also that the gastrointestinal tract needed to move through the next two food groups. He ate a lot of meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. So there was his protein. And meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs was also supplying another food group, which was fat. Remember, he just experimented on himself. Few things happened. His weight just fell off. Why? Well, he's not supplying the quick release glucose stores, and so his liver has to start breaking down his fat stores. It's called gluconeogenesis, creating glucose from the fat stores. He was never hungry. Why? Because these are the three food groups that keep the food in the stomach longer. Fibre binds up the glucose and it slowly releases it. Protein, well, protein's broken down specifically in the stomach. And fat, it coats the food a little bit, so it takes a little bit longer to break down. That's good news, because it means we don't have to be eating all day long. We can eat and forget about food for the next 5 or 6 hours. He had heaps of energy. Where's he getting his energy from if he's not giving this quick release glucose foods? Well, as I mentioned, his liver breaks down his fat stores to give him the glucose, and his liver has the ability to break down protein and fat to give glucose. He had lots of energy, weight's falling off him, and he's never hungry. Has he found the perfect diet? Well, the 11 million people that it has been estimated has been helped by his diet agree. Number 1 on the New York Times best-selling list was 4 years running. You know what this information says? This man demands us to have a look, because I want to know why. So when I had a man come to our program who said to me, he was a businessman, he said, I know you're not going to like it, Barbara, but I go so well on the Atkins diet. Now, if I'm worth anything, what am I going to do?
Listen.
I'm going to listen. Because this is his body. It works well. I was interested. And I was interested in a way that I'd never been interested before. Because people used to say, oh, that Atkins diet's terrible, meat, butter, cream cheese, eggs. So I thought, oh, well, I'm not too interested in that. But I became interested in this man. And it's quite a long story. It's a fascinating story how eventually the book came across my path. I opened it. I could not put it down. I read it in 2 days. His science is correct. There's the science. So when Atkins was popular, I used to give a meeting called Dr. Atkins' Missing Link. And his missing link really is the vegetarian protein. I'm jumping ahead. Let's have a look at what he found. So he started to put some of his patients on this. Oh, they were so happy they can eat anything they can't usually eat on a weight loss diet. Weight's falling off them. Within 6 months, he had all his patients on the diet. After a year, a few things started happening which he was unprepared for. His cancer patients were going into remission. How so? Do you remember what cancer cells are consuming? 15 times the glucose of any other cell. This is a low glucose diet. His diabetics were coming off their medication. This is type 1 and type 2 diabetics. Absolutely there was weight loss. You might be surprised at the next one. His patients on with high cholesterol levels came back to normal. And what are they eating? Meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. What are people told if they want to get their cholesterol levels down? What have they got to stop? Meat, butter, cream, cheese, eggs. Is that right? He's scratching his head. He only did it for weight loss. And that's why he wrote his book. But before he wrote his book, he went into the medical journals. And he opened once again his anatomy and physiology book that he hadn't looked in for probably about 20 years. And this is what he found, that these 3 food groups are the essential food groups. Why? Remember, we've got to ask why at every step. Well, fibre sweeps the gastrointestinal tract. And if it doesn't get swept every day, it starts to slow down and not work properly. And if the colon doesn't work, the whole body doesn't work. Plus, it is in the fibre part of food, there's often a concentration of the nutrients. Protein's essential. 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is protein. Remember yesterday we looked at how the new cell is built up with amino acids? 50% of the membrane around every cell in the body is fat. Whether you're 100 kilos or 300 kilos, I'm talking about the membrane around your cell. Except for the brain cell, it's 70% fat. And that's little fatty sheath around the tail of the cell, that gets your brain cells up to 70%. In fact, the brain's the fattiest organ in the body, and you know what it loves to eat? Fat. We'll have a look at that. What Atkins found is that the non-essential food group is carbohydrates. This surprised him. Now let me define that. I'm not saying carbohydrates are bad. I'd be a fool to do that. We love them, we enjoy them. They're not bad. They only pose a problem when they're overdone and refined. Got that? Notice the 2 words, overdone, and surely on the high carbohydrate diet, it's a little bit overdone, isn't it? And refined, because most people that are on this diet, it's refined. But you can still overdo the unrefined carbohydrate. So because of that, your carbohydrate part of your meal is your negotiating part of the meal. And the negotiations change depending on your height, depending on your size, depending on your age, depending on your physical and mental output through the day. But probably most, it would depend on your health status. So if someone wanted to lose weight quickly, safely, drastically, what would they severely eliminate? The carbs. Someone wanted to conquer cancer, what would they quite drastically drop? The Carbs. Someone wanted to conquer their diabetes. What would they drop? The carbs. Someone wanted to put on weight. This is a trick question. How did James put on weight? Yeah, you don't increase the carbs, because I don't know anyone that wants to get fat. In fact, what we find, and we found this last week, that our overweight people lost weight. Our underweight people put on a little bit, and our people who were the right weight, they just stayed the same, and they're all eating the same food. The Bible says, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. People say to me, Barbara, do you ever step sideways? Do you ever have a little bit of junk? I said, why would I do that? I feel so good. I sleep well. I like the results. So notice what the Bible says, prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. In other words, do it. And just keep at it. How can you do it, though, on a vegetarian diet? Let's have a look. And we're going to go to Genesis 1:29, where God's telling Adam and Eve what to eat. Because I don't think you can improve on the Garden of Eden diet. Let's have a look at it. In Genesis 1:29, God says, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth. We're going to have a look at the food. We're going to have a look at the protein content and the carbohydrate content. God says, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed. So what's a seed? That would be grain. A seed would be legume, like often called the beans. And a seed would also be seed. So let's look at grain. You've got wheat, rye, barley, oats, amaranth, buckwheat, quinoa, so many, rice, so many grains. They are high in protein, but they are also high in carbohydrates. So let's glance over at our carbohydrate list. How many of these are from grain? So we've got grain, grain, grain. We could say grain, 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 because all the cake section. Grain, grain, grain. The majority of our carbohydrate list is from the grain department. What's a legume? That's your chickpeas, lima beans, black-eyed beans, cannellini beans. Well, you call them black-eyed peas, don't you? Lentils, soy. They are high in protein, but interesting to note that they are medium to low in carbohydrate.
Wow.
That is interesting, because if you go to the modern Atkins books, which is your keto diet, your ketogenic diet, your paleo diet, they will say don't eat legumes because they have carbohydrates. Well, they do, but not a lot. Only a third what you will find in the grain. What about seed? You've got pumpkin seed, sesame seed, sunflower seed, chia seed, flaxseed or linseed. These seeds are high in protein, but they are quite low in carbohydrate. So God said, behold, I've given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree. In the which of the trees a fruit-bearing seed? What's a fruit-bearing seed? There's your nut. All your nuts come from the fruit of the tree. And we've got, you say pecan, we say pecan, walnuts, cashew, Brazil, hazelnut, almond, so many nuts. And the nuts are high in protein, but quite low in carbohydrate. So to ensure you're getting your three essentials, the fibre, protein and fat, my suggestion is you increase the legume, nut, seed part of the meal and decrease the grain part of the meal. That's an easy way to do it. You can see why Atkins' diet was so popular. You can see why the paleo diet's so popular. But what comes into the equation also is Dr. Colin Campbell's book, China Study, where he shows that he could switch cancer cells on and off by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving to the rats. There's hardly a meat that is safe today because of the way they're fed, because of the way they're killed, because of the way they're stored. It makes it so much easier on the vegetarian diet. But one of the reasons why so many people stop the fat is because of cholesterol. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
So let's have a look at cholesterol. It's a good time to look at it because the liver makes cholesterol. And by the way, it makes cholesterol according to the demand our body puts on it. And 80% of the cholesterol that the liver makes is made from glucose. And 20% of the cholesterol that the liver makes is made from fat. Now this information tells us straight away it's not the butter on the bread, it's the bread under the butter that's the problem. And that's what Atkins found. So let's have a look at cholesterol. There are two main types. One is high density lipoprotein called HDL, high density lipoprotein, and LDL. HDL is usually called the good guy, and the reason for that is it's the carrier. So it carries excess cholesterol from the blood back into the liver. That's why it's called the good guy. LDL is called the bad guy. But what you've got to remember is the body doesn't make anything bad. It has a role. So what is its role? Its role is that of a repairer and a rebuilder. So wherever there's damage, you're going to find LDL because it's the repairer and the rebuilder. But it plays another role. It delivers cholesterol to the brain because the brain loves cholesterol. Cholesterol to the brain. Now let me show you something briefly. We're going to look at this in further detail later. Glucose burns at 4 calories per gram. A calorie is a unit of energy. That's what glucose burns at. Whereas fat burns at 9 calories per gram. Can you see why the brain loves fat? Because fat is going to give more than twice the units of energy, and our brain cells, they're consuming fuel fast. Let's have a look at the blood vessel and how the cholesterol works in the blood vessel. Because of its low density, LDL is always on the edge. Because of its high density, HDL is always in the middle. Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride, who wrote the book Put Your Heart in Your Mouth, she spends the first 4 chapters of her book defining what damages the arterial wall. See, the arterial walls are lined with little endothelium cells, and chemicals damage them. Heavy metals damage them. There's your mercuries. Also, what damages them is mold. And we're exposed to, she defines, the reason why it's 4 chapters, she defines all the different chemicals. They're in toothpaste, they're in food. What's going to plug the holes up, students? The LDL cholesterol, that's its role, that's its job. So it comes along and it plugs up. If it doesn't plug the hole up, we would bleed into the tissues. Can you see that? So they're like the Band-Aid. But the person doesn't realise that the mouldy house is killing them. The person doesn't realise the 4,000 cigarettes, 4,000 chemicals that are in a cigarette. So they keep smoking. They don't realise the danger in their washing detergents, in their toothpaste. So can you see that it's still happening? And they read an article that says, no, mercury does not kill you at all. Well, they haven't read the science. You know, it's a neurotoxin. Can you see what's happening? Something else is happening. So all through the bloodstream, we've got little molecules of protein. When a person is on a high carbohydrate diet, releasing a lot of glucose into the blood, the glucose connects with the protein molecules, and these little combinations become sticky and they stick. And let's say we've got a narrow piece here and they come along and oops, they've caused a blockage. That is the number 1 cause of heart disease. That is the number 1 cause of a stroke, is this little blockage here from the movement of the combination of the glucose and the protein making it sticky molecules. On a low carbohydrate diet, you haven't got that process happening. To blame cholesterol for heart disease is like blaming the fire trucks for the fire. It's like blaming the ambulances for the accidents. Well, they must have caused it. Have you noticed that they're always there? Can you see that reasoning? We have quite a few books in our library at Misty Mountain, and I'll write them down at the end of the lecture. I realise I didn't write down yesterday's books. I'll do it all at the end of this lecture. The Great Cholesterol Con by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. Notice what he calls his book. He's a cardiovascular surgeon, the Great Cholesterol Con. And this is what he said in his book. For the first time, normal levels of a normal, vital body substance is being called a disease. We have a book, an Australian doctor, Dr. Peter Dingle. His book is The Great Cholesterol Deception. We have another book called The Great Cholesterol Myth by Johnny Bowden. And there is an e-book by another cardiovascular surgeon, Dr. Dwight Lundell, called The Great Cholesterol Lie. We have another book called The Great Cholesterol Hoax. We're running out of words. And in her book, Put Your Heart in Your Mouth, Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride, she's saying the same thing. These people don't know each other. They're from all over the world, and they've come to the same conclusion. It is not cholesterol. Dr. Ansel Keys, back in 1953, he put forth the theory that fat is causing heart disease. Did you hear that? So really by the 70s and 80s, it's big. Isn't that true? Fat phobia, that's what we call it. Fat phobia. So you know what they did in, I think, the late 70s? They created margarine to try and get people off butter to lower the heart disease. Has it?
No.
No, not at all. And what's the definition of insanity? To do what you've always done and expect different results. But something else has come up now, neck to neck with heart disease, and that is cancer. So that's one of the contributing factors. But something else has happened as a result, and this is well documented. You can search this one out. Margarine causes macular degeneration. That's a proven fact. So what else have they done to try and lower heart disease? Put everyone over the age of 40 on cholesterol-lowering medication, yeah? Cholesterol-lowering medication. Are you ready for the side effects? Dementia, muscle wasting, Alzheimer's, memory loss, and they've just added another one, breast cancer, because our sex hormones are made from cholesterol. I'll tell you a story to illustrate. I had a lady and a man attend my programs in New Zealand. I think that was about 2 years ago. They were in their early 70s. Tuesday night I spoke on heart disease, where I revealed what's happening with cholesterol, the truth on cholesterol. They came to me on Thursday. They said, we need to talk to you. I said, yes. The man looked at his wife and she just had her head down. He said, we're about to put my wife in aged care. He said she was leaving the iron on. We got to the point where we won't be able to handle her. He said, we came to your lecture and we heard what the cholesterol-lowering medication does. She's been on it for 10 years. It was Lipitor. There's a whole book written on the dangers of Lipitor. He said, so we stopped because they heard me say there will be a side effect to stopping Lipitor. Your memory will return. So this is a drug a person can be on 10 years and just stop. The side effects will be beneficial. He said to me, we're on our third day, and he said, I've got my wife back. He said, we are not putting her, we did not want to, but he said it was getting so difficult. And they both had tears in their eyes. How many people are in aged care with dementia and Alzheimer's and memory loss, and it's the cholesterol-lowering medication? I believe personally this verges on criminal, especially when you hear what I'm about to say. It was probably 5 years ago now at Living Springs Retreat. We had a scientist do our program with his wife, who was a nutritionist. They're both in their late 60s. She's 69. She said, I've been a nutritionist for 40 years. So she said, I was educated in university 40 years ago, and she said, 40 years ago we were told that a cholesterol level of 300 and under was perfectly normal. Has the body changed? No. So can you see what medicine has done? They've dropped the levels. They now say that if you are over 190, you're a walking, talking heart attack. I have had people say that to me. One girl was 30, her cholesterol levels were 192, and the doctor said, you've got to go on cholesterol-lowering medication. 30! We had a pharmacist do our program. She said, this really annoys me. She said, I know it's only a money-making scheme. Because if you go on an antibiotic, you're on it for a week. If you go on cholesterol-lowering medication, how long are you told you're on it for? Life. Now, she said, oh, I'm a pharmacist. I'm not against drugs. It's my business. But she said, this annoys me. You see, the brain needs fat. So, a study was developed or started, I should say. A study was started in the little town of Framingham. In the little town of Framingham, 30,000 people were assessed. This has been going for 30 years. They started it to prove that cholesterol causes heart disease, but it hasn't. It hasn't at all. Some people with low cholesterol levels are having heart attacks. We had a lady from England do our program. She said, I had a heart attack recently and I had a cholesterol level of 150. She said they did an angiogram, my arteries were clear. What happened there? She was under great stress. You know, great stress can constrict the arteries. There are many factors that come into play, as you probably can see. But what this study showed, the Framingham Heart Study, that's what it's called, it showed that people with high cholesterol levels don't get Alzheimer's. Why don't they get Alzheimer's? Because what does the brain love? Fat. So what's a good cholesterol level? Oh, probably 200, 250. So see what's happened? They've got many people on cholesterol-lowering medication. They've got everyone on the fat-free diet. And because you're not getting the feeling of satiation or satisfaction when you eat, the person eats huge amounts of carbs. They've lowered the cholesterol level so they can get more people on cholesterol-lowering medication, and people are eating margarine. Oh, surely all of that has reduced heart disease. No, it's still the #1 killer in the industrialised nations today, neck to neck, as I said, with cancer. So what's your liver doing today? We're not giving you enough food to run on. And so some of your fat cells are getting broken down to give the glucose that you need, but something else a little bit more sinister is being released. And that is the fat-soluble toxins that have been coming into our bodies over many years. Now this explains why your body odour might be a little worse than usual, why your breath might be a little worse than usual, why your what you're leaving in the toilet might have a worse odour than usual, because your fat cells, as they're getting broken down to give you that excess glucose or extra glucose that you need, the fat-soluble toxins are being released. They're back into the blood. The liver says, oh, not this guy again. The liver's about to wrap it up in fat and store it, and the liver says, oh, hang on. We're at Living Springs Retreat. We're receiving the nutrients necessary to break that down to a water-soluble state, because it can't be released in a fat-soluble state. So what your liver is doing is taking it through 3 phases. Phase 1 of the liver detox began yesterday on your first day of juicing. And in phase 1, your liver took this fat-soluble toxin and it broke it down to a metabolite. So what's a metabolite? Metabolite just really means the first stage of metabolism or breakdown. The first stage of breakdown, the metabolite is released. But this metabolite is highly volatile. This metabolite creates a lot of free radicals. This metabolite is highly toxic. In fact, in some instances, it creates a substance 100 times more toxic than it originally was. especially in the case of alcohol. And you might say, well, what's the liver doing? It's just created something far worse than it originally was. It's a process. It's just like when we clean the kitchen cupboards out, the kitchen looks 100 times worse than when you started. Or I'll give a guy illustration, when you clean the garden shed out, it looks 100 times messier than when you started. It's a process. Within 36 hours of starting the detox, phase 2 kicks in. And phase 2 basically comes to the rescue. In phase 2, the liver takes this highly toxic metabolite and joins it together with amino acids. The union of this highly toxic metabolite with the amino acids, in fact the scientific term is conjugated, basically joins it together like that. So the conjugation of the amino acids and the toxic metabolite releases the water-soluble state, or converts it to a water-soluble. And remember, as a water-soluble toxin, it can be easily released out of the body. So phase 3 happens in conjunction with phase 2. So in phase 3, the body takes the water-soluble state and it releases it out via your sweat glands. That's why your most important steam sauna is today, because you'll be releasing more water-soluble toxins than any other time of the week. It releases it out via your colon. So if you're not evacuating every day, please see the staff and they'll give you a little bit more of the colon tea. But also out via your kidneys, your urine. That's why it's vital that you ensure that these 3 organs of elimination are eliminating effectively. No use cleaning the house and leaving all the rubbish at the door. Make sure the eliminating organs are eliminating effectively, and that will ease any symptoms you may have on the detox. So what does phase 2 need? What does the body need to support the liver to cope with this toxic metabolite? It needs antioxidants. And antioxidants, they basically mop up the free radicals, these free radicals. So what are the most potent antioxidants? Beta-carotene. Beta-carotene is found in all your orange and your green coloured vegetables. Have you noticed that every juice we give you is either green or orange or red? So we're supplying high beta-carotenes to you. Also, probably the most famous antioxidant is vitamin C. Vitamin C is not ascorbic acid. Ascorbic acid, I think it's Dr. Robert Thompson in his book The Calcium Lie, he explains this. Ascorbic acid is just the envelope. Have you ever got an envelope in the mail with nothing in it? In other words, useless. But when you buy vitamin C, make sure it has bioflavonoids with it. That's how you find it in nature. That's called the whole C. Also vitamin E. Vitamin E is a fat-soluble vitamin. So you're getting your vitamin E in your protein drinks. So in your protein drinks, I think we either make it with either organic soy or almond milk and put a little bit of coconut milk in there with your pea protein powder. So you're getting your vitamin E there. Can you see that we are nutritionally supporting your liver to effectively detoxify you? I'm going to put this sideways because they are not antioxidants, but your liver needs them at this stage, and that is your minerals. And your minerals are in everything, especially that broth at night. Also your juices with your organic fruits and vegetables, and that little bit of Celtic salt that you're having before every glass of water. And vitamin B. Now, Deborah, I think it was you asked me last night, why is my urine bright yellow? I said, it's the B vitamins. You're not losing your B vitamins, it's just the reaction that it has in the body. So within 36 hours, phase 2 kicks in. What does phase 2 need? So phase 2 needs protein. Now this explains why yesterday, on Monday, we gave you 2 protein drinks. So you had 5 juices yesterday. So Monday, 5 juices. Your 8 o'clock one was green barley, 10 was the protein, 12 was green barley, 2 was protein, and your 4 was green barley. Because yesterday your requirements for antioxidants exceeded your liver's requirements for protein. But notice today, well, today's only just started, you'll be having your 5 juices again, but the 8, 12 and 4 you'll be given protein. Whereas the 10 and the 2, that's where you'll get your green barley. You still need those antioxidants, and we certainly are still supplying them, but because you've gone into phase 2, your protein or amino acid requirement is greater. So the protein that we use is a pea protein. It's been pre-digested. One lady said, "Who digested it?" It's an enzyme action, like taking milk to yogurt. That initial breakdown has begun. We wanted to bypass digestion because we want your body to remain in the detox. So today is probably, if you're going to have any reactions, it will be today. Yeah. But what we have found, that since we've been implementing the protein, we don't get many adverse reactions happen at all. Now, if someone comes to our program, and it has happened in past times, who is a painter or a hairdresser or a cleaner, they've had big exposure to chemicals, we give them protein every single juice. And we had a Vietnam veteran do our program. He told me that most of his friends were dead, half of them were suicide, and half of them were cancer because of the chemicals. I think the Vietnam War was the first war where they used chemical warfare. And his doctor had said to him, "Don't lose weight." Why did the doctor say that? Because the doctor knew that his fat stores were full of fat-soluble toxins. So we gave him protein every juice. Remember what the protein does? It mops up those toxic metabolites. Now, we know our history. We know Jesus went through a 40-day fast, and I think it was a miracle because it was food and water. But we see in times past, there are some writers that have advocated long fasts. Today it is not really safe because we are exposed to more fat-soluble toxins than any generation that has ever lived on planet Earth. It's coming in so many ways that we don't anticipate. I often say we're exposed to 30,000 new chemicals every year, but I was reading an article recently, 100,000 new chemicals every year. You have no say over your neighbour, but you have total say over your little piece. So just ensure that your washing detergent, the food that you're eating, it can come in so many ways. One lady said, "It's going to take me forever to shop." I said, "No, only the first shop. You just devote a bit of time, bring your magnifying glass. After that, you know exactly where to go. When I go into the supermarket, I'm not in there long. I know I get that aisle." One man said, "Just stay on the outside aisles." That's where your fresh things are. So please investigate so that you don't have any more exposure to those chemicals. I thank God that He has given us a liver that has the ability to detoxify us from the environmental poisons that we are exposed to today. That is the good news. But you'll notice that this also supports what Atkins found. I think when Atkins died, he didn't realise the 3 phases of the liver detox. This has only been known since, I think, early 2000s. The more scientist is able to delve deeper into the body, the more is revealed. But you can see why his diet was working, because he was supplying high antioxidant. Did you know that his patients had to eat 3 cups of vegetables a day and 1 cup had to be greens? I think that's the only way they got away with it. Certainly there was enough protein. and certainly adequate levels of good fats, which keep those cells nice and supple. Now, there are a couple of herbs that you might be interested to know that specifically have a tonic effect on the liver. In Psalm 104 verse 14, the Bible says that God gave herbs for the service of man. I love that verse because you just picture the herbs coming in. They come in and say, where would you like me? That's exactly what they do. Lemon, the humble lemon, has a great tonic effect. You might have heard the old saying, bitter to the mouth, sweet to the stomach. And sweet to the mouth, bitter to the stomach. Well, you apply that to the liver. Bitter to the mouth, it's a sweet to the tonic. So, to the liver, a sweet tonic to the liver. So all your bitter herbs. So let's look at some bitter herbs. Dandelion. Dandelion is a well-known liver herb. Also St. Mary's thistle. St. Mary's thistle is also called milk thistle. And gentian, this is not as well known. Gentian is also an incredibly bitter herb. And a sweet bitter is ginger. So your 10 o'clock juice, which is Granny Smith apple and ginger, I think it's one of the nicest, has a nice stimulating effect to the blood. Tonight, when we look at poultices, I'll be talking about ginger in detail. So there's some of the herbs that stimulate the liver. Remember, the liver is a recoverable organ, and if you give it the right conditions, it can begin to recover. We're going to have a break now, and when we come back from our break, we're going to be looking at those little chemical messengers in your body called hormones.